Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree back with you today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today, I'm joined by an ultra marathon runner, Ronnie Staton. Hopefully, I'm saying that the right way. This man has some amazing achievements in the ultra running world, his own personal achievements as a racer, but also he is also a running coach and a mindset coach and a race director as well. So Ronnie is involved in each aspect of the racing world. So today, as always, we'll be talking about ultra running. We'll be talking about sports and the mindset it takes to reach a high level in one of the toughest sports in the world. Hopefully, some of these tips will help you, the viewers, in your daily lives, be that running or be that another venture altogether. But we'll also be, as well as the fun stories from the races, as well as the fun stuff there, we'll be going a lot deeper into the mindset and motivation. So stay tuned, everyone. Thank you for watching. And Ronnie, thank you so much for making time for this interview. And it's great to be here with you. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. You pronounce it Staten, but I'll forgive you because everybody says Staten. I
Oh,
mean, it's
there we.
the singer Candy Staton has done me no favors because everyone thinks it's spelt the same, Candy Statin, so it must be Statin. And I guess you could pronounce it Statin, so I'm not offended, and I'm very used to it. So, but we do try and pronounce it Staten. But yeah, no, great to be here.
Well, it's great to be with you, Ronnie Staton, and it's I find it an irony that of all the names I pronounce from people all over the world, people in Asia, people in Russia, and those sorts of countries, and all these weird and wonderful names, and when I slip up, it's on one a lot closer to home. And I relate, by the way, because with my last name Hartley, I always get Hartley. I always get, so I feel your pain on that one. My apologies. But anyway, moving forward with your life and your story. Now, as I've mentioned, we'll walk through some of your races. We'll walk through the mindset side of things and the coaching. But I am going to go back in time a little bit just to get a little bit of a feel for where you're from and just to get a little bit of a feeling of if sports was always part of your life or if it's something that came into your life at a later date. So let's start there, please, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's quite interesting actually because just yesterday I was in a primary school talking to young children, and so walking into that school, I was kind of casting my mind back of what I was like at that age, and I struggled at school. I struggled learning. I struggled reading and these academic skills, but I always loved sport, and I actually always loved running as well, just the pure feeling you get from it. So I was definitely always there, and that stayed with me through secondary school as well, is kind of struggling with the academic side of things, but loving sport, loving football. And then in my early 20s, I was an amateur boxer. And then from that, I wanted something that I could grow with. And I started looking around and hearing about ultra running. And I thought, these guys seem to go forever. They're not like retiring at 25 or 30. That you've seen a lot of these guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s even and beyond. Developing with the sport, and I thought, in my late 20s, I thought that's the sport for me because it's something that I can do and potentially keep getting better with for many years yet. So yeah, the background was that I was a personal trainer for 10 years and then got more into the ultra running coaching and then the race directing. So absolutely a common thread throughout my entire life.
Okay, that's a very cool start to the story. I like that. I like that a lot. So, a couple of things to touch on briefly there, and then we'll go in depth into the ultras. But you mentioned that experience in school, and I only bring this up because I think it's something a lot of people relate with. To be honest, I personally relate with what you were saying there as well, but I think a lot of people will. Do you think that there's an element that in schools they do cater more to the academic side of things, and they don't always cater to people who have more practical talents in that sense. In a sense, you always had a talent for running. You always had it by the sound of what I was hearing there, a lot of energy, and one of those people who has a lot of energy to put out. Would you say that was sort of welcomed during your school years, or would you say it was more shunned or pushed aside, maybe somewhere in between, if that makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. I think it's contained too tightly. I think it's put in a place of that's just PE, and it is just PE. It's not going to get you anywhere. Unless you are a super talent, which I never was. So unless you are an extraordinarily good football player or, rugby player where you're going to break through, and then it's given more attention because you've got a potential career with that. But exactly, it's seen as just something you do. Oh, well done, that'll keep you healthy and fit. But we've got to study. I think it's completely misunderstood and still is. And in fact, when you look at the time dedicated to physical education now, it's less than it was. The amount of time kids are moving is less than it was. It's getting worse. And then in leisure, kids aren't moving as much as there was. The streets aren't as safe. They're staying in on Xboxes and all the rest of it. So it's the education system has got to recognize that everybody who does well in life stays fit and healthy and moves a lot. That's almost a generic rule that when you look at people doing well in business, they normally look after themselves. They understand the value in movement and in health and in fitness, and to just discredit that is a real mistake, I think, but also not to recognize the different learning types within schools. And I think that's improving. But I just always felt misunderstood and a little bit neglected at school, quiet, shy, wasn't able to articulate myself. And then if I didn't want to learn something, I'd just mess about. And there's all reasons for that I understand as an adult now, but the in school they did, and yeah, there wasn't the opportunity enough to move and to have the credit for physical education, I think. So without a doubt, it's not accommodated enough, not respected enough, and there's not enough time in the timetable for it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you on that. And like I said, it's something a lot of people relate to. It is improving, but yeah, to underpin what you said there, I mean, the holistic aspect of physical health is, it's not just your body, obviously, it's your mind, it's every aspect of you. If you're healthy in your body, it feeds over into your work, into your relationships, into everything else. So it's a very, very powerful lesson. And as you say, different learning styles that needs to be recognized. And very briefly touching on one other thing you said there, and then we'll go into fully into the running and the races. But you mentioned the amateur boxing there, and I'm not sure if you've seen with some of the work I do, but there's a lot of the big names in boxing I've been lucky to work with in interviews, photography, other types of media that I do. So I have to ask, how long were you doing that, and can you share with us maybe a few highlights or just a little bit about the timeline of the amateur boxing, and then we'll go into the running from there.
Yeah, there's not much to it in all fairness, Liam, but I had 18 fights, so not many fights really in the end, but I had 18 fights. I won nine, lost nine, so only had a very average record in the end. But I'd say that's because I fought some good lads, and I did fight anybody really. Perhaps sometimes with a much better record than myself, and that can happen in amateurs, and also sometimes quite a little bit heavier than me, and we're only just making the rules as well. But yeah, no excuses because I probably won a few that could have gone either way as well. But I was probably for about 3 or 4 years amateur fighting in my really early 20s after university. I feel like I should have, when I was 15 years old, going to the boxing club. I'll be totally honest, I was just terrified. And I was really fit, really enthusiastic, really loved the boxing, but then was just didn't have the character that I've grown over my lifetime at that age. I didn't know what I know now, and there wasn't the help with that mental aspect of the boxing as well. And I think a lot of boxers will tell you that they might have a good corner man or a good coach, but I think they harnessed the right attitude already. And I just this the thing of the success and failure of boxing didn't suit me at that time in my black and white thinking, and I wasn't afraid of getting hurt. I was afraid of losing, and that just delayed me getting in the ring till in my early 20s, which when is most boxers are going pro. And I always felt like I was catching up, and a lot of the lads I'd be fighting were younger than me and hungry because they want good amateur careers and potentially go on to pro. And just the comments you'd get from people saying, even though you was a novice and just started up, people would ask you, "Wow, you're still boxing, you're still going in the amateur scene." It's like I've only just started because you felt old in it. But yeah, it's taught me a lot about life, and boxing is not something you play, as you know, with the guys you've interviewed, and it's a serious sport. And once you kind of feel like there's nowhere for you to go, you kind of stop, and that's why I needed the running.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but it still it makes a lot of sense the lessons you learn from it and everything like that. So that's a real good little insight. There's some life lessons included in what you said there as well. So very cool. Okay, so the ultra scene, obviously what you're known for and what you do now, is well, there's a lot to talk about here. So to set the scene, how many ultra races have you actually run in terms of anything over the marathon distance and everything? Now we will talk about how you got into it. We will talk about your development and building up to that. So don't worry. But I just want to, for anyone who doesn't know, just get a feel for that if that's even something you keep track of because not everybody does.
I don't. I genuinely don't. I absolutely I've no idea. It's quite a lot now. It's building up. I think I was trying to count. I've not even kept a solid record of the 100 milers that I've done, but I think I've done in the region of about 17 100 milers when I was counting it up, and that might be part of other races as well, and not be a true strict 100. And I've gone over 100 miles and beyond probably about 7 or 8 times. But so in terms of just over that 26.2, I have no idea. It's quite a lot. My body's taking it's taken quite a beating over the last decade in particular. So yeah, we're getting up there, right? If I was going to guess, I'd maybe say 70, 80, but it would be a guess. And there was times through my training where I really fell out of love with the recording. Now I'm a coach, and I do record my training much more accurately. But there would be times when I'd run without a watch, and I would just run to feel, and I'd go months without logging any miles. And I do know other ultra runners sometimes do that. So it's a bit of a less it's less known now with people on Strava and running watches so readily available and all the apps that are available to log your miles. But it's been quite a new phenomenon for me in the last few years to know how much I've run it per year, because even when I logged it before, I wasn't adding it up. So probably never bothered to sit down and look at what I'd run in that year. But now the app just tells me at a glance. So that's quite a different thing about running now.
Absolutely. Well, that's another thing. Some of the changes, I mean, we'll get to that later with some of the changes, but yeah, you will have seen the development of ultra running as a sport as well. So we'll come back to that. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about your beginnings because I just wanted to highlight that because you've done a lot and it, as I say, it sets the scene. But in terms of the fact that your life wasn't always like this, I mean, you would have been finding your way, you would have been building up the miles and everything. So I follow what you said. You like running in school. Running is obviously a part of boxing training as well. So there's different things in the background there. But in terms of how you built up to it, did you start with sort of 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, anything of that nature beforehand, or just to get a feel for your progress? Because one of the things I love about ultra running is it is a very individual thing in the sense that people are competing a lot of ways against themselves, and really their development of how they find their way to this can vary quite a bit. So yeah, just to hear a little bit about your progress from whatever you started to the 100-mile point, please, would be really cool.
Yeah, I'm certainly not the kind of stereotypical story that we hear a lot of. And I know you interviewed Nathan Fleer. He's a good guy, and he's gone from a unhealthy lifestyle, self-admittedly, and then used running as a tool to lose weight and get fit. That never happened to me. I was always active. I was always fit. I lost my way a little bit after stopping boxing, granted, for maybe a few months and put a bit of weight on, but it was never about fitness for me. And it wasn't structured like that for me in the first place, where I had a plan of a rational 5K, 10K half. And you'll often find that it's a little bit more ad hoc than that. But for me, at the time I lived in a place called Gainsborough, which is still in Lincolnshire where I am now, but got the River Trent. And I just had this overwhelming urge to just run down the River Trent. And I didn't know ultra running existed. I didn't really know anything about trail running at all. Didn't know it was a sport. Knew of road running, obviously, but it just didn't feel like something for me. And I'd just sling a rucksack on my back and I just started running down the River Trent. Again, no watch, because I didn't have a running watch and there wasn't very common then. And the most amazing thing happened to me, which still happens now, but at that time I'd never experienced anything like it. But my life wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I realized it was me. And it was running down that riverbank that I saw a clearer picture of the habits and the thought patterns and the way I was behaving was coming out and manifesting into the world. And I thought everybody else was the problem. And running down that riverbank, I realized I was the problem. So, mid to late 20s, I'm starting to realize that the way I've been living is creating my reality. And I'd never seen such clarity until I ran, and it was hard to deal with because it was hard truths of just seeing myself of how I was behaving. And it sounds too cliche to be true, but that's exactly the experience I had. So I just kept doing it instinctively, of just running down the river. And then I did borrow a mate's running watch, I think, and I was running up to 15 miles just off the cuff. I got a lot of injuries and I got a lot of problems from doing that. And then I had to take more of a structured approach because I was a personal trainer. I just didn't transfer any of my fitness knowledge to running. It was more of a innate kind of instinctive primal feeling that I had to run. So that's where I started. And then I began to look around like, I'm getting hurt, I'm getting injured. Is there a better way to run? Is there ways that I can strengthen my body up? Do I need to structure my running more? And then I caught on to ultra running. And it was from there, and I remember it well. It was a New Year's Eve, and I sat on my computer and I booked a 50 miler for the summer the following year and went straight in for the 50 and then trained for that 50 miler the next year. And that's how I first initially got into ultra running.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, first of all, I mean, what you say about the primal urge to move and everything, I've heard that from a number of individuals actually. Not everybody. I mean, some people it's a lot more structured, but I have heard that. But the sort of epiphany that you had there, and that I'm going to say it sounds like a spiritual experience, and I say that very broadly in terms of put my personal view of this spirituality being just an increase of awareness in one area or another, and any dogma and any other viewpoints, leave that out of it. But in terms of an increasing awareness and you becoming aware of your own life, I'd like to hone in on that just for a moment. In terms, you say it still happens now. Is this something that it's not something you actively pursue, it's something that just happens as you're running? So it's a quite a broad question, this, but where has that aspect of running taken you in terms of the self-awareness and the awareness of your life, and how has that progressed from that side of it to the point you are now?
Yeah, no, great question. See, initially, I was totally unaware with what was happening. It was just something that happened to me, but now it is something that I can consciously cultivate and harvest. So I can, if there's something bothering me in life, I can go out and run with that and think about that and let that just swill around in my mind. And it's a different type of thinking when you're moving and you get space around your thoughts. So it's one of the main reasons I run now. I'm nobody's getting any younger, so there are events out there that I want to pull in and I want to do them, and I'm more motivated and infused now than I ever was, and I was always up for it. But in terms of running daily and it being part of my life, the mental aspect and the consciousness and the well-being is really what I'm fascinated by, inspired by, and driven by. And obviously, you get all the secondary physical benefits from that, which, to be fair, I'm not really motivated by, but I want to be healthy. So they're just taken care of. I find the way that you can go out running with a problem initially and come back with that being a solution or something you can cope with better. Yeah, let's give an example. If there was a meeting in the afternoon that I was quite nervous about, apprehensive about, but not entirely sure why, I might run in the morning and ask myself, what's bothering you about that meeting? And my answers come. It might be that I don't like the person. It might be like I don't feel comfortable with what they're trying to sell me, or we're trying to set up. There's something amiss, and it's something about moving. And therapists are using it now. They're walking with their clients. We know the benefits of being out in nature. There's a book by William Pullen called Run for Your Life, and he's a therapist, and that's exactly what he did. And I'm stealing some of his kind of techniques here because I've read his book, I've recommended it to other runners, and he does exactly that. He asks you to think of a question you want to run with and run with. So it started by accident, and then it's become something that I cultivate.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I mean, not to go off topic with this, but it is quite amazing when you start doing that type of inner work in one way or another, just how deep it can go. And there's so many things inside of us which we're not necessarily aware of in the beginning, or we're often aware of it, like you say there, a symptom, but we're not aware of the cause. And it's fascinating. I've experienced a lot of that. Funnily enough, I have experienced that clarity running. I mean, I only run like a few miles. It's nothing like what you're doing, but I have experienced that where things seem so much simpler, not to the degree you're talking about, but I have wondered what that is. We'll come back to that a little bit more shortly. And before we do, in terms of the ultra races themselves, this question might sound like a little bit of a cliche, but obviously with ultras, they take you into all sorts of fascinating terrain and all sorts of unusual places that you probably wouldn't go otherwise necessarily. I've got a feeling you might, but a lot of people wouldn't necessarily go exploring some of these unusual places. So, out of those, do you have a favorite place that running has taken you that you wouldn't have necessarily gone if you weren't doing these vast distances? It's just something a little bit out of the box. I try and think of questions people don't get all of the time, and that's one that if I put myself in your shoes for a moment, uh, not that I could really keep up, but metaphorically speaking, if I put myself in your shoes, you must see some remarkable locations. So are there any that stand out in that way?
It's twofold this because it's what you see in nature. It can be the cloud inversions, it can be the mountains, it can be the sunrises, the sunsets, the deers. It's being immersed in nature and running day after day. And most runners will talk about that, and it is cliched, but you're present, you're in the moment. You're often tired and in pain as well, but there is you are immersed within the natural world. So yeah, there's definitely been places across Scotland where I've captured cloud inversions and such like, which was amazing. But I'd say then secondly, the thing that I've always loved about the real journey runs, I've run across England, Wales, and Scotland. Um, is the towns. Like normally as an ultra runner, I want to be remote and I want to get out of these places, but the quaint villages and the people's homes that you run by, and the imagination that sparks in my mind at least, because these are country roads and small towns of places that I would never ever have a reason to go to and visit. And when you're running along and you're in this kind of relaxed state and you maybe got hundreds of miles to go yet, you're dropping into these quaint little villages and passing through them, and you know, not to be too imposing or nosy, but just seeing into people's windows and their gardens and how they live, and I just find that fascinating to pass through places, and obviously accents changing as well if you do happen to say hello to locals. So you're on foot and you're hearing accents change as you run. I do love the long distance kind of journey run. And if you run across the country, that's definitely, you'll notice that from North Wales to South Wales, and from you know, the west of England in Cumbria to then the east in North Yorkshire, and the dialect, I'd say, yeah, so it's the nature, but then it's the villages, not so much the cities and towns, and we don't tend to run through those anyway, but these little hamlets that you did not know existed, and you do not believe people live like that still. And you know, there might be 10 houses in a hamlet, and I find that amazing because my understanding of the UK and the country that we live in, and Britain, is expanded from where I've been, that I would never ever have a reason to go.
Wow, I love that. I love that. That was just something I have brought that up from time to time with people, but I just had the instinct that there would be a really cool answer bringing that up with you, and so there was, and that's also quite incredible. So, obviously, going back to some of the deeper side of things for just a moment now, not only have you had your successes with running, obviously, and the various things you've achieved. I know it depends how you frame that and how you look at that, but I think it's still an amazing and inspiring achievement, some of what you've been doing. But you had the feeling to want to give this back to people or contribute to people and basically move this beyond your own experiences. Now, I can see how that connects in a way because of the personal training and what you were doing. But nonetheless, what was the inspiration to move this journey beyond yourself? And teach people about running. And I could imagine, even from talking with you this short time, teaching them about life and about a lot of deeper things as well. Where did that inspiration come from in the beginning?
I just have this feeling that when you catch a hold of something that you're passionate about, and you're maybe not even sure why, I just think you should lean towards it. You should just fall forward towards it and kind of see where it takes you. So I didn't have a great plan. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have anything. I was personal training, and that was a great job, and it still is a great job for the guys doing it. But there was something about it that didn't quite suit me. And I found this passion in ultra running. I just started to lean towards it more and more. And then the more I did it, I thought this is just a lateral step from personal training in a gym to coaching. And so I went and studied and tried to make that lateral step. But on paper, it didn't look like it'd ever work. From going where you are picking up clients in a gym environment, which is driving your business, and you're going out one door to some degree, but then you're getting recruitment. It didn't look like I'd ever be able to build a name to be able to get recruitment and get runners and get that feed. So a lot of people kind of said to me, it won't work this. I don't really see how you're going to create a business to, but all that by the way, I was going to do it because I felt like I'm loving this ultra running. I'm loving doing it, and I want to be more immersed in it. I want to be more involved in it. And because I've already been coaching people in a gym setting, I want to coach people to do this. And I guess the bottom line of it would be is I can feel how important it is to me to do it. Like it's an expression and articulation of something that I couldn't describe as a child, and my struggles in school, and now I'm able just to live freely and do what I love. And I know for people, though they might not do it as a job, and though it might always just be a hobby and a sideline, I know how important it is to them. And I wanted to be involved in something with those people that have such a love, and ultra runners do have a love for running. They're not recreational runners. It's part of their DNA. It's part of who they are. They commit so much time to it. The guys that have been doing it a lot longer, absolutely love it and would lose their identity without it. To be involved with them people I knew would be special, and it certainly is, because I'm so fortunate in my life that I'm not trying to motivate people. I'm quite often trying to rein them in. I'm just trying to guide them and help them. But all the fire and all the desire, they already harness as an ultra runner. So it becomes more about techniques and volumes and how we run and how we train. And to have that passion just bounce back and forth was I knew it'd be there. I knew if I could get involved with helping ultra runners, I knew that's what it would be. And it was exactly as I'd imagined. And yeah, I feel like the luckiest guy alive with what I do. I absolutely love the ultra running coaching. And that was the other thing. I didn't intend to be an ultra running coach. I intended to be a running coach. But all that came my way was running ultra runners. That's all I got interest off because that's what I was doing. So I don't actually do anything other than ultra running now. And if somebody requests, as a standard runner, I defer them and say there's other coaches that you'd be better suited to because you won't get the value from me because I'm focusing on ultras.
Absolutely. Well, you know what's cool about that, Ronnie, is well, quite a few things I must say, but I love the authenticity of what you're saying, and it's a very, very simple thing to say, but at the same time, it's very far-reaching. Is that obviously you are living your authentic life, you are living your calling. I mean, it goes beyond a career, you know, your soul's calling, what you feel at home doing, and so forth, and that really resonates from you. And I think that a lot of people who are well, let me put it to you this way. I read, it's not necessarily a question, but you know, it's a cool subject. I read this thing a little while ago about when people are close to passing away, you know, when people have terminal illnesses and what have you. Um, there's five most common regrets that they have, and there's a number of things. You know, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I spent more time with my family, etc. But the number one, you probably know this, but the number one is I wish I'd lived a life that was true to me and not a life that other people expected me to live. So people get to the end of their life, and you know they become a doctor or a lawyer when they maybe wanted to be something entirely different. Nothing wrong with those professions, but you know they didn't follow their hearts. And I really love the fact that you, and it sounds terribly cheesy to say, oh, you're following your heart, but actually, you know, you really are because, as you said earlier, you're also manifesting and creating your most authentic path. And I just love that. And that's not really a question. I just, for anyone who's listening to this, you show people that that is possible. And a lot of people don't realize that that's possible. As you said, it would, you know, it wouldn't work on paper, but yet it does work, and you're living it. So what a powerful statement in and of itself. I love that. You also do a lot with the mindset, though, don't you? So you're obviously coaching these people physically, but when I had a look on your website, um, it's hard to say, you know, where the one thing ends and another begins with ultra running, with the physical and the mental. But nonetheless, can you share with us a little bit about what you do or how the mental aspect, and I will say maybe the emotional aspect, comes into your running coaching as well, please?
Yeah, the way I do that is, like you mentioned, it's hard to know where one ends and another begins. So what I do is I don't put it aside from the physical training. I don't make a thing of it. It's just it's not a different package. I'm forever drip feeding that in. It's if I'm receiving messages, it's all remote, it's online. So the great thing about that is people have to think what to write. And I think you can get away with conversations sometimes, and you just get away with the way you frame stuff and move on. But when you write a message to somebody about how an event went or what your ambitions are for the following 6 months to a year, have to compose that. You have to think about that. And so I do feel like I get to know somebody more deeply than I would actually chatting on a phone. And from there, I will see thinking errors potentially. I will see somebody lacking a confidence. I'll see somebody not being quite congruent with what they're saying to me to what they're then going and doing. Or, it could even be about nutrition, something they want to lose weight, but then they're telling me what they're eating. And all the time that I'm interacting with the runners that I work with, I'm just trying to gently get them to see the best decision for them to make. So I'm never suggesting what I think they should do. I'm just putting something out there, and then they've got to then decide with that information that I've given. You know, it's not going to work in a draconian kind of coaching manner, like I want you to do X, Y, and Z. What must happen is I can maybe help their awareness to something that's going off. You know, why do you think you might not finish that event? And then they tell me, and I say, well, yeah, that could be true, but how about if we do this or that? And then they come up with the ideas and the suggestions, because then that's empowering. It's never going to be empowering me telling them what to do. So I might have to manipulate slightly, be suggestive slightly, but I want them to come up with the answer. So it's something that I do constantly, and I studied cognitive behavioral therapy, and so I'm a qualified therapist, but I don't do therapy. There's not even a package there. There might be in the future, but I found I only did that to assist my coaching and underpin it and have that awareness of how somebody thinks and then how somebody behaves. And so I drip feed it, and we don't make a thing of it. The runner doesn't even know that I'm doing it. We're just trying to get, my job is to get the best result for that individual. I don't really see how I can do that if I neglect the emotional, the thinking, and even the spiritual side to a degree. If I'm neglecting the well-being, the human being behind the runner, how on earth can I get the best for that runner? If we just treat that person like a robot on paper of training, and we neglect that they've got a family and they've got a hard-working job and they've got things happening in their finances or relationship, it'd be a bonkers thing to do. So for me to get a better grasp of how somebody thinks, how therefore somebody feels and then behaves is paramount to me as a coach, I think.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, the individualism, again, the authenticity, even the empathy, really, of what you're saying, which is not necessarily a word you'd always hear, or you'd always expect to hear with coaching, but it is because a lot of people do a lot of number crunching with these type of things, and they don't take into account the human factor. So, I'm really glad we've got to give that a mention, and it must be very rewarding for you to do this type of work as well. And I hope that also, if anyone's out there and they want to join in, I will say to our viewers, look Ronnie up, look at what he's doing, guys. You know, if you are interested in the ultra running scene, obviously it's not for everybody to run that far, but if that is something you want to do, then you know he's not hard to find. Also, for with this, we alternate between the deeper things and the more nothing's really mundane about this, but the more, you know, the things you'd expect to hear. So one I have to ask you for entertainment value, although I think again it'll go deeper than that, is about your what you regard to be your one of your toughest runs or one of your most difficult challenges or this type of thing. And again, not just to focus on that because I don't really dwell on those any negatives like that. It's all about what you learn from it. But I am curious because it's not always the terrain and whatnot, is it? I mean, there's often things that go wrong in various other ways, including often in people's lives outside of the race itself. But anyway, whichever form it takes for you, is there one or maybe more than one that stands out as being your most challenging individual endeavor so far?
There is, and you're exactly right. It's not really what's on paper, it's the experience that you have at that event. So my most difficult challenge to date still, even though I've just done the spine, which 268 miles on the Pennine Way in January, and all the rest of it. We might get to that to talk about that a tiny bit, but that is definitely up there with one of the hardest things I've done and the most challenging things I've done. But my hardest thing I've experienced was still running across Wales, the long last trail, the bike trail from the tip of Holyhead right down south to Cardiff Bay, 252 miles, because I just could not sleep. And by the time I got to kind of like 200 miles, I was absolutely losing my mind and I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't stay awake. And I fell out with a woman called Joan for about 8 hours. And I thought Joan was telling me to keep resting on park benches and things like this. And I was getting really frustrated with Joan. And it came to a head about 3 a.m. in the morning. I was sat in a rugby club, and I didn't lay down at that point because it was quite cold. I didn't know how long I'd be asleep for. So I just thought I'll sit upright and I'll have a little 10-minute nap. Didn't really work effectively. But anyway, I go to get up and Joan's telling me to sit back down. And I lose my head and I say, Joan, I've been patient with you. I wanted you to finish. I wanted us to finish together and all the rest of it. But I said, I need to get this done. I had about 25 more miles to do at this point. And I said, I'm leaving. I'm going. I'm sorry, Joan, I'm going. And I walked off and it hit me. And I realized like Joan was never, ever there. Like the whole 8 hours I'd been falling out. Joan never existed ever. And I started hysterically laughing like a madman. And she never came back once I really realized that she wasn't there. So that was just that was one of my darkest hallucinations, if you will, that was so persistent and so discombobulating. And because of that, that experience of falling asleep moving but not actually being able to sleep was hell. Because mile after mile, I was waking up, walking into fences. I woke up in front of cars in the road. It was just deadly. But I didn't want to quit, and every time I tried to stop and sleep, I couldn't, and I was so close. And so yeah, the demons and the hallucinations, it was definitely long last, definitely getting across Wales, and I made it, and it taken just under 78 hours. And I'd barely slept in those 78 hours. So yeah, that was a tough one. But also that was on tarmac. That was a cycle trail. So my feet felt like the bones in my feet felt like they were broken. I'm not used to road. I'm a trail runner. Some other guys train quite a lot on road and I don't. And the whole thing was a mess.
Wow. I mean, that really does personify the brutality of all of this. And I am going to use that term. Obviously, there's a lot of rewards. There's a lot of insights and things you learn about yourself. There's the things you see, the people you meet, like we were saying earlier. But the brutal side, the hallucinations, I've heard some weird ones. I spoke to a lady. I don't know what last year, and she was saying about faces and things appearing in puddles and things like this. And some of the stories I've heard, and I'm thinking, okay, so um, okay, so that was that one. What was the other thing? Oh, the spine. Yeah, you mentioned about the spine. I do want to talk about the spine now. Obviously, with this, honestly, Ronnie, I would love to talk with you about every race, but we'd be here until next week. And I did have in mind to speak about the spine because it's so famous and because it's, well, infamous, actually, is probably a better term than famous. But because it is one of those, well, it's one of the toughest races around anywhere, and I don't know if I can do it justice in words. So I will actually turn that over to you to describe in your words the same type of thing, the high points, the low points, and how you got through it all, basically.
Yeah, likewise, I'll struggle to articulate the challenge of the spine in words, and especially briefly. It's so difficult because you can't grasp it. And I've been around the spine race since it started really in 2012, I believe it was. Until you're on it, until you're doing it, it's really difficult. But it starts in Edale in Derbyshire, and it makes its way north and kind of goes through the Yorkshire Dales and then keeps creeping up north and goes through Northumberland and ends on the Scottish borders in a village called Kirkyettam. 268 miles. I think it's just over 10,000 meters of ascent, so 32,000 foot. It's done in January. There's 16 hours of darkness, 8 hours of light. Temperature was mostly -10 through every night. We had beautiful clear nights and the stars and the moon, but bitterly cold, snow and ice everywhere, which the benefit of that, the bog's freeze, so you glide over those rather than sinking in. But the downside is the slippy, it's black ice and it's cold. I wanted super cold, so I was very, very grateful for the cold Arctic weather that we got. That's what I wanted, because it had just been drizzling and kind of warm, wet in the build up, and we had this cold snap that hit right on time. And I think the coldest it got was around Crossfell and Exposed Hill. It was about -18. There was quoting up there. I don't know. It was cold. It was cold enough, but I was never cold, personally, but you could feel the cold, and that posed challenges to you. So again, I think it was night two and night four. I was in a position where I'm moving along, but I'm falling asleep. And you've got no cover, you've got no shelter, and you had to carry with you a sleeping bag. The kit list is extensive, so your bag's quite heavy. You have a bivvy and you have a sleeping bag. The problem with that is at those kind of temperatures, the sleeping bag that you've got goes down to zero, and you don't really feel like you're going to get a sufficient rest. So it'd save your life to get in that, and then you might be too cold and then you need rescuing, or you just get to the next point and you're out of the race. But as an actual sleep strategy, it didn't feel viable to me. Some guys did pull it off, they did do that. But for me, at the times I was falling asleep in the environment I was in at that particular time, it didn't feel like you could. You're scanning the trail for any kind of shelter you can get out of the wind and out of the snow. So you've got to get to the next point. And that was like the height of the adventure, really, of being trapped in this. I'm falling asleep, but I've got to get to that next point. And you felt right on your limits. Like this is what I signed up for. This is why I'm here, because I'm right on my limit of not being able to get to that next point. And the ramifications of that, um, at best you're out of the race and you get rescued. But if you get it completely wrong, your life's in danger. So that it sounds sick, but that's why we do adventure. We do it because we know the ramifications. We do it because we know the consequences, and we do it because we know it's a game. We know it's a game that you can actually pull the plug. But to get that monkey off your back, it for me anyway, it's just choice that I never want to have to make. And so the spine is just to have the Pennine Way, to have that trail, in England and then touching to Scotland. What a magnificent thing that is. It opened in 1975. To have the right to roam all the way up that trail, passing waterfalls along Hadrian's Wall, things that you don't expect, High Cup Nick, things that you just do not think we've got in this country. And rivers were frozen over, and I'm telling you, I've never been, but it looked like the pictures you see in Canada. The scenery just stunning.
Well, that is incredible. I mean, you've done very well there to distill that down into well, a very descriptive but a very concise explanation, and I appreciate that because there's bound to be so many layers to that experience that it's just absolutely immense. As we come up on the time I said, there's a couple of other things I'd like to talk with you. Keep them to about an hour, so it's sort of a good length for people to be able to take in. Although I know with yourself, we could definitely do a lot more. I mean, we're only scratching the surface here, but nonetheless, a couple of other things that I'd like to mention. One of them is to briefly talk about your race directing and to hear a little bit about that. And then after that, I'd like to talk about your future plans, and I have one abstract sort of philosophical question, and then we'll wrap this up. So, but starting with your race directing, please. Can you share with us a little bit about that in terms of what you do and in terms of what it means to you to contribute to races in that way as well, please?
Yeah, I mean, again, I got into that completely by fluke. A race was going to be stopping quite nearby in Sherwood Forest, and with a few months' notice, really, I kind of bought it, took over it, and went for it with no prior experience. Because again, it was just this leaning towards ultra running, and that was the Dukeries race, the Dukeries 30 and 40 mile in Sherwood Forest. And so from that, I thought, I like this. I'm going to set more events up. So the company's called Hobo Pace, and we've got the Robin Hood 100 mile, which is our kind of flagship race, really. Robin Hood 100, running into Sherwood Forest, doing a couple of laps, and then running back out. Goes past the Major Oak, so Robin Hood's base there, and it's just a fantastic race. And I know what people commit to these kind of races. Like any ultra runner knows that. So to provide something which people are working towards is a great thing because yes, it comes to that weekend and we do what we're doing and we host the event to our best of our ability and we have a great time. But it's a bit more than that. It's about all the training and preparation and the focus that that gives an individual. So I do like to be involved in that side of things. And they don't need me. They don't need Hobo Pace. There's enough events out there. But for me personally, again, it feels just it's just another part of what I do. The coaching and the race directing just play off one another. It's especially quite it's really nice when I've got runners I've coached on the Robin Hood, for instance, and that'll be happening again this year. Probably got 5 runners that I've coached for that race, and then I see them on that race. And I've had some great records. I think once I had 6 runners on it, and 5 out of the 6 finished. And it's just a great thing where the two worlds collide.
I love that. I absolutely love that because, as I said earlier, with your coaching, obviously you being in the field, you doing these things. It's the same thing with the races. Obviously, you do it yourself, so you'll have a lot of understanding to offer um, to the people who are seeking that challenge, especially if it's early on in their ultra running journey, if you like. So, really good to give that. I wasn't sure if the Hobo Pace was something it makes sense. It's your brand now. I wasn't sure if that was like a nickname or something else for but it makes sense. So okay, so that's that side of things. And Sherwood Forest, what a setting as well. What was the other things I was going to say? So your future plans, obviously your future plans, this is quite a broad subject because we have your coaching, we have your race directing, we have your running personally. Um, I'm sure you'd be the type of person who probably has a lot of other fascinating life areas. But in terms of what we're talking about today, being running and coaching and those sorts of things, it's a very big question about the future. And I also know that you're not necessarily the type of person who wants to put everything down on paper. As you said earlier, the coaching and some of these things, it's come from development, from manifestation, from the flow. But nonetheless, I think you also did mention that there's certain races you do have your eye on as well. So with those sorts of topics in mind, can you share with us one or two things about the future? It doesn't have to be everything, but just to give a feel to people for what's inspiring you, what's lighting your fire, and to show people that life is a journey of continuous improvement, which never really ends as such. So there we go.
Without a doubt. I mean, I've done a lot of low key events, which I love and I don't regret. But I'm now starting, I'm 43 and we don't need to go into this, but I had the massive stroke 5 years ago as well. So I had to recover from that and get back to where I am now. And so I've had that kind of taste of nearly losing running and being paralyzed and then having to come back from that. So I'm now looking to do more of the iconic races and some of the things that maybe back then I didn't have an interest in. I wasn't financially secure enough to do or didn't want to do, didn't want to travel. So, maybe 1 or 2 international events, Western States springs to mind. I've started entering in the ballot to do the oldest 100 miler in the world in America. Spartathlon, which Nathan Fleer, as you'll remember, has done very, very well a few times there. So these bigger events, I want to try and get there, and it's obviously not all down to me because they're oversubscribed. The ballots could take me many years to get into some of these things, but next September, next year, I'd like to potentially do Dragon's Back, a multi-day across Wales, and then Cape Wrath in Scotland, maybe the year after. So some more beautiful long runs, but a bit more iconic, a bit more like the spine was. So I'm getting on board with that. That's happened already this year. So I breathe a little bit of sigh of relief that I've got a feeling of what I want to do and I'm manifesting it. I've started to go after some of the big guns now, whereas before I did big races, but very small, and people might not have heard of them. So just for me and just for experience, some of them I don't want to miss out and I want to try and go after them. Professionally, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I just want to go deeper into that, just improve, get better all the time, advance that. But ultimately just do the same, but grow depth to that. I want to write more, definitely want to write more. I end up doing a lot more things like this as well. It seems as I'm getting older, podcasts and visiting the different places, businesses, the school yesterday. But and I see the speaking as part of what I do as well. And if I can do it, I'll always say yes because I think it's just another way of expressing my passion for what I do. But yeah, writing, I know it feels like everybody's writing a bloody book right now, but if I could get a hold of my thoughts in a more rational, logical way, which might happen one day, then I might get congruent chapters. At the minute, I've got a whole bunch of chapters that don't make a book. So one day I would like to try and kick out a book there down the line, but with everything else that I'm doing, and while I can still run, and while I'm still blessed with the ability to run, that's what I'm going to spend most of my time doing. And hopefully I get to write a book, but I'm finding that hard to I'm a family man as well. I've got three kids. To put everything together, there's only so many hours in the day, and so yeah, we'll see how we go.
Well, again, it's a wonderful insight into how you've distilled down so many different things that you want to do. I mean, yeah, seeing you in some of those big races would be absolutely awesome. And again, I know with what you do, it's not about that. It's not about the, being famous or any of that type of thing. But at the same time, it'd be cool to see you get that type of recognition, I must say. And they're all great races that you mentioned, Western States, Spartathlon. Dragon's Back, my neck of the woods. That's a good one. I mean, they're all good races. So and the book, yeah, I mean, I hope you do, my friend. It's up to you, but I hope you do because I would definitely read it. I think a lot of people would read it. I think it would have a lot of life lessons, a lot of knowledge in there, as well as the running. So we'll see. Which leads me to my last question for you. Obviously, with everything that you've been through in your life, including the stroke, by the way, which I wish I'd heard about that, but I didn't know much about that. So I wish we'd had more time to mention that. But anyway, with all of these things that you've come back from, and all these things that you've been through, what do you regard success to be, or your definition? Because some people, obviously, like we're talking about with these big races, they focus on money, or they focus on being famous. And these days, we've got all these influencers and all these type of people. And um, not to go off on a tangent with that, but with what you're doing it for inwards reasons, and there's not really um, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's the journey in and of itself, and what you get from the journey. Obviously, it's nice to get the special times and things, but you know what I mean. It's a lot deeper than that. And unless you're doing like UTMB or one of those big ones, there's not really the glamour around it. So, and that's not a bad thing. I actually mean that as a compliment, because it goes back to the authenticity. But I know it's a big question and a strange question. But as we close out, your personal definition of success in life, and this is different to everybody, but what would it be for you, Ronnie?
Found my way in life. I found a way to live, happily and content and not be bothered about all the things you just mentioned there. I'm not a fast ultra runner. I don't win races. I've never won anything, but still I want to do it. I'm very internally driven, and I'm an introvert by character as well. So I never get bored by myself, and I'm alone a lot. I do deem my biggest success is that I've been self-employed pretty much all my working life, other than a few little jobs when I was first coming out of school. And so to be able to provide my own income for that entire time by doing something that I'm invested in and passionate about, and I didn't follow the sheep or the crowd in any which way. I think it's actually what I would say is my biggest success, especially with how I struggled at school, being a shy, quiet boy. And I'd be someone like in primary school, the teacher would take me under their wing because I was struggling. So to find my feet in life like that, I think's been my biggest achievement actually. And whatever the time say on the clock with the running and all this kind of thing, I've got ambition, I've got aspiration, but I ultimately think the fact that I'm just doing it, and also coming back from the stroke to continue doing it, is what I would deem my biggest achievement, and hopefully long may it continue. And the more I do this and the more I ultra run, the more I want to do it. It just seems something that I'm going deeper into rather than growing out of. Just absolutely, sucked in by this whole world and the great community and the people that you meet and the positive mindset of these people. And we just leave the naysayers behind and get on with what we're doing. I just love all of that. So yeah, I think for me was the life that I've created, especially when so many people told me it wouldn't work and that it didn't make any sense. And who can blame them? I mean, an ultra running coach doesn't really sound like a real job, and so to pursue it anyway, just from a feeling, is a bit irrational. So for it to pan out and for it to work, I smile. I feel pretty good about that.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. Well, what can I say at this point, really, to sum this up? I knew this would be a good interview with you, Ronnie. That's why I've been looking forward to it for a while. But it's honestly exceeded the expectations I personally had for it, in terms of, like I said to you at the beginning, I had those two twin visions of some fun stories from your races and some of the deeper side of, the mindset and everything. And we've ticked those boxes and then some, but we've actually gone into things a lot deeper than I was expecting. But it's absolutely amazing because that's why I do these is to share those lessons. There's the old saying, I think Isaac Newton said, if I've seen a little bit further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. And it sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's one of those things where if people can pick up one or two tips or little, not even tips, but if people can think of things a different way or look at things from a different point of view or not be stuck in the rigid conditioning that they've been given and so forth, then I really feel like I've done my work. And obviously, it's not me; it's the people on here. I asked the right questions, but what I'm getting at is we've really, really I'm really happy because we've really hit that nail on the head of the much deeper aim as to why I do this, if that makes sense, with the inspiration and the motivation. And obviously, I hope it helps you as well. Some more people will hopefully hear about what you're doing and plug into your social media and coach with you and find out what you're doing. So I hope that helps as well. And I just, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. So I'm just really grateful for not only for your time, but for you being so open about your life, the highs and lows of your life and the lessons you've learned as well. So thank you very much, mate. Thank you a lot.
No, thank you for your kindness. I take that as a huge compliment. Absolutely my pleasure, Liam.
Well, it's true. I just say it as it is. I mean, funny enough, that's my thing has always been having like a way with words or whatever since I was young. And the thing is, but it is true. And I mean, there's so many subtle things contained in this that I think it's one of those ones people could listen to it more than once and pick out things the second time that they didn't notice the first time. I mean, you don't have to do that, anyone watching, but if you want to, you could. Anyway, yeah, Ronnie, thank you so much. I will release this over the next few days, ideally across the weekend or early next week. I'll send it to you when it's released as well. So I would be super grateful for like a reshare or something like that, if that's okay. Obviously, I do most of that my side, but it's nice to have the endorsement. But other than that, mate, I really look forward to following your journey some more. Personally, just from me to you, I look forward to seeing what comes next for you, and keeping an eye on that. And I don't say this very often, but if you wanted to do another one after you've done some of those big races, so like telling the story of say Dragon's Back or Spartathlon or something, I think it would be very good. Um, Probably not as long as this, but it would be very good as well. So that option is there if you're up for that. And yeah, I look forward to keeping an eye on you, basically. Uh,
Yeah, good man. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Just keep in touch, and then yeah, in a year or two or whatever I've done, yeah, I'm happy to come back on, mate.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great evening. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.